I've reviewed countless pitch decks as a VC investor, and I can tell you within 30 seconds whether a founder understands top-down communication. The ones who don't, their decks are a complete mess of details and they lose the investor by slide 3. Today, I'm going to show you the framework that separates amateur decks from the ones that get funded. Top-down communication means starting with your main conclusion first and then giving the supporting details. Bottom-up is the opposite. You pile up facts and hope the listener connects the dots. But the problem here is that VCs, they don't have the time to connect the dots. They're evaluating tens, even hundreds of pitch decks in 1 week. If you don't get your big idea across immediately, then you're out. This comes from my background in private equity and restructuring. When you're analyzing businesses all day, you need the answer first. Is this company worth 50 million or not? Then you look at the evidence. VCs are the same. Pattern matching. Does this fit our thesis? Yes or no? Your deck needs to answer that question immediately on every single slide. Most founders structure their decks like a research paper. They build up evidence and they reveal the conclusion at the end. That's academic thinking. In business, executives want to hear the headline first. Think of it as a newspaper. The headline tells you almost everything, and the article then provides you the details if you want them. Before we get into breaking down exactly how we're going to structure your presentation on a slide-by-slide level, let me tell you, there is one very specific difference between slides you send on an email and the deck that you present on a Zoom call or in an in-person pitch. And I will reveal this at the end of the video. I want to get into some of the slides here that I prepared. We're going to talk about a fictional company called NeuroHeal. Let's get started with this negative example. Right, so in this fictional company, we have this title slide. Obviously, please disregard the slide design. I made this up just to show you what a bad pitch deck will look like. A couple of examples here, a ChatGPT generated logo. Those are the elements of a title slide. But then we get into this claim. First thing they say is pioneering non-invasive AI-driven neuroplasticity via multimodal I'm completely lost what that means. But this is very common, actually. We laugh about this here because you probably also see this immediately. But this is something I come across quite often, where the founders, they are deep inside their company. They know all these things. Often they invented this branding, so-called branding around these products they have. They name these products. The listener or the viewer has no idea, especially if you're reading this ahead of the presentation. You have no idea about these details. So this mistake that is made is talking in buzzwords, talking in industry speak, and the viewer has no idea what that means. So you need to break this down. Any investor presentation needs to be broken down as if the investor is a golden retriever. That's what I always say. Like, explain it to me as if I was a golden retriever, because smart people can actually explain very complex things in an easy way. It's also a way of revealing, like, do they really know what they're talking about, or are they maybe hiding behind some of these buzzwords that actually they can't really back up? Because the idea should be simple. The investors you're talking to, they're smart people. They look at hundreds of ideas all the time, and they know how to read pitch decks, how to understand something that they are maybe not 100% familiar with. But you still need to make it very easy for them to understand and easy for them to get into the thesis and try to explain what it is that you're really solving. So let's get into the next slide here. So the best practice for a second slide should be the problem versus solution slide. And here we have the persistent challenge of subacute post-stroke, again, overuse of buzzwords. And then quite small on the side here, we can see stroke represents the number one cause of long-term disability worldwide, impacting more than 110 million individuals annually. So this is actually a very important sentence that they have here, but they're not really bringing that to life. Chronic loss of mobility, increased payer burden, insufficient clinical capacity. These are all valid problems, but they're not framing it in a good way. Like, what is the big picture? What does that mean for the company? What does that mean for us solving this problem? So if we continue on this fictional deck, like, obviously this is a very bad example, but I will show you even without a pitch deck can look very good and be very punchy. I have an example, positive pitch deck that we'll get into in a minute, that doesn't have as many images, but it actually brings the message across much better. So here, again, an overuse of buzzwords. Here in this description of the product, they talk about the proprietary the NeuroStim Core, which seems to be one of their products. I mean, I like the fact that they're putting proprietary in there. I think one of the most important things in any pitch presentation to an investor is to show what is the uniqueness of the product and how can it not be copied, especially in health. How can you prevent this to be copied by any of the big ones? And I mean, this counts for any industry. And how can you build a moat so that there are high barriers to entry into the technology that you've created? But that, again, burying it down here in the slide, instead of making it as one big claim, this is a proprietary product that has already solved this, that, and the other. I don't know how many of these slides we want to get into, but let me do one more. This is an example now of how not to do the TAM slide, because if you're talking about your tiny startup that will go after a $380 billion market, this very quickly becomes somewhat unbelievable. And it really comes down to, like, is this actually the market that you're playing in? Anyone can come up with a big number that supposedly makes up the market, but you need to really break it down into the actual market is you're going for. So obviously they have this breakdown here, TAM and SAM and SOM at 3 billion. I mean, still, you need to back this up with patients and patients' data that you can actually serve. So just to say our potential is infinite because everyone has a brain, that is just such a bold statement. Yes, you should make bold statements, but this is just such an over-the-top statements that it's just unbelievable. And it comes down to the fact, like, if something is too good to be true, then it usually is. Okay, let's get into the positive example that I have here. And you see I use the same logo here from ChatGPT, but even looking at this slide, obviously design can be improved a lot. But I did not have to have any images on this slide deck here because the claims are so good. Like just this intro slide. Every 2 seconds, someone in the world has a stroke. Half of them never fully recover their movement, and we help stroke patients move again faster. This is such an immediate delivery of what the company is about, what product they have, and how that can help really excel the company. What I also like about this is that it starts with a very human story, because any technology is usually, if it's a good technology, then it's very technical, and the details are difficult to understand if you're not doing this thing day to day. So if you can somehow humanize what you actually deliver and how you can make it relatable to the person you're speaking to, then that's much more emotional and also like stays in the mind of the listener a lot longer. If you make them think about their parents, for example, if you make them like just understand that this is relatable to them, and then if they succeed, they will also be a beneficiary of this technology. So now they get into the detail of the problem. Rehab takes too long and most patients never finish it. I mean, you can read this yourself, and you immediately see that this is a much better build-up in terms of the story. It starts with a claim at the top. This is also very important. Investors want to see a claim at the top. This is something that everyone who's had any touch points with the finance industry or consulting industry has been taught, and this is just the way it's done. I understand that startups do things differently, but when it comes to raising capital, if you're not Mark Zuckerberg, then stick to what works and copy what works and follow the rules that have been set in the industry. Don't put your title at the bottom. It doesn't work. The title belongs at the top. It needs to be a sentence. It needs to summarize. This slide here focuses on empathy and clarity, and investors can instantly see the pain point that this company is addressing. Now, this is going to the product side. So we see immediately, oh, it's a wearable. So now we immediately understand from this still abstract brand name, we didn't change the company name, NeuroHeal, we understand now that it's a wearable and what it does. Immediately on the title. And then very simply, it goes into how it does it. So this is the top-down approach. Like you start with the most important part, and then you get into the detail. The top-down anchor, what it is, what it does, and why it matters. Now, what I suggest, if you have a very high-tech company, and there is a lot to explain, and if somebody is from the industry, they will understand exactly the jargon that you use. What I suggest there is do a multi-step approach to diligence, because you need to use the first 5 5 minutes for the people. Usually the way these pitches work is that you have 30 seconds to get the next 5 minutes. And then you have to use the 5 minutes to get the next 30 minutes. And then you need to use the 30 minutes to get to the next level, which maybe then is an in-person meeting or pitch day invitation. But it builds up from very small amounts of time. At every stage, it's like hooking someone on a YouTube video. At every stage, you need to show the investor or the potential investor that it's worth their time to keep listening to you. Another thing that we see on this slide is that we have immediate validation and we can show traction. So you can turn, obviously these are all stats that any company would love. This being just an example, it still makes the point that you need to show the traction both in user adoption, in brand names that you can leverage. So here they put ETH Zurich and Zurich University Hospital as their partnership. This is made up, so we'll take it as an example. This can show that these institutions have already adapted you, and this is very big. Instead of going deep into technical jargon that may be well known to the experts, shiny, bright logos that everyone knows is still the way to go, I think. All right, let's stop this here and let's get into what I was promising at the beginning. Because finally, your entire deck needs top-down architecture. This is where most founders really mess up. They save the best stuff for the end, and that's wrong. Lead with your strongest points. A weak structure has team, problem, solution. Traction is then buried at the back, business model, and ask. Whereas a stronger pitch deck would have the traction and proof, if you have it, and then lead with the strength. Then you get to the problem and the solution, your insight, and the why now. This is very important. Then go into business model, sizable markets, and all of that. Competition slide, very important. And at the end, you have the team. If you have traction, anything that you have already done, proven, etc., lead with that. Don't make VCs wait until slide 10 to see that you have 3 products that you already have customers for. What you also might have noticed, the team slide is at the end. And that's because if your business is working, then the team has already proved themselves. And if it's not working yet, then the team slide won't save you. Start with what's working and double down on that. Okay, here's the ultimate top-down move. Create an executive summary slide, one that tells the entire story. This could be in very few sentences, the problem, the solution, the traction, the revenues that you've already generated or aggregated, and then the ask of that round. If a VC only reads one slide in your deck, this is it. Everything else is just supporting evidence for these 5 bullet points. Yes, you can literally copy that format. This is where we get into the difference between the slide deck you send out via email and one that you present on a Zoom call or at a demo day. So the difference is that if you're at a Zoom call or an in-person meeting, then often you plug in your laptop, you have the PowerPoint slide is up on the big screen, and you're still doing small talk. You're still chit-chatting. Maybe you have technical issues. You're figuring something out. So this is all valuable time of your slide just having free real estate. If you put a cover slide there that is just a title or at the end even, because that's also a very good move actually to have the same, repeat the executive summary slide at the end. If you have this ridiculous thank you slide, this is such a waste of space because often it's that slide that will end up being shown for the longest time. So if you flick through the presentation as you go, every slide has a couple minutes, but then at the end you take questions and you explain something else maybe. You have that executive summary that is just up on the screen or on the Zoom call, and you can just end on that. And if you're not flicking back and forth because you want to show something, that slide just has the longest screen time, and you can really take advantage of the fact that you get questions, and people who maybe didn't have that question, maybe not that interested in that particular question, they still are doing something else. They're looking elsewhere. They're looking on the screen. What's on the screen? Well, that's where your slide lives. And they may read and soak up more details about your company by just looking at their screen, looking at the presentation, and that's how you make that executive summary slide count. Before we wrap now, let me just call out the 3 biggest mistakes that I see. Number 1, burying the ledge. Founders say, we'll get to the results later. No, tell me upfront. We grew 500% last year. That belongs on slide 2, not slide 12. Mistake number 2, vague headlines. I see slide titles like market opportunity or our approach. Those tell me me nothing. Compare that to we can capture 30% of a $5 billion market, or our AI reduces costs by 80%. Be specific, be bold. Mistake number 3, death by detail. The appendix exists for a reason. Your core deck should be 10 to 12 slides max. Everything else, detailed financials, product roadmaps, customer testimonials, that goes into the appendix. The VC will ask if they want more. Don't front load complexity. So here's your homework. Open your pitch deck right now and read only the slide headlines. If someone reading just those headlines doesn't understand your entire business, you have a bottom-up deck. Rewrite every headline as a conclusion, not a topic. Do this and I guarantee you, your deck will be in the top 10% of what VCs see. If you want me to review your deck structure, drop a comment below with your industry and stage and pick a few to analyze in a future video. And if you're serious about fundraising, learn how to command a room by watching this video next.